literacy.
You know what I love about our digital public infrastructure? During COVID, when my mom was working in the hospital and my dad was sick, I was able to check in real time infection rates, ventilators. That made a difference. When we make our digital public infrastructure as ubiquitous as our physical infrastructure, the sky's the limit. And as long as we have the will to get it done, it will happen. Gotta go. Pizza's ready.
Yay, Mommy!
I first started to care about digital public infrastructure when I learned how difficult and demoralizing it can be to get social assistance in the US. And then I saw groups like Benefit Data Trust who had a vision of how help could be easy, it could come to you, it could anticipate your needs for both social workers and for people in the toughest times of their lives.
I discovered digital public goods in 2014 when I worked on an innovation competition called EduApp for Syria. The aim of that initiative was to reach Syrian out-of-school children with learning resources that could help them attain basic literacy.
You know what I love about our digital public infrastructure? During COVID, when my mom was working in the hospital and my dad was sick, I was able to check in real time infection rates, ventilators. That made a difference. When we make our digital public infrastructure as ubiquitous as our physical infrastructure, the sky's the limit. And as long as we have the will to get it done, it will happen. Gotta go. Pizza's ready.
Yay, Mommy!
I first started to care about digital public infrastructure when I learned how difficult and demoralizing it can be to get social assistance in the US. And then I saw groups like Benefit Data Trust who had a vision of how help could be easy, it could come to you, it could anticipate your needs for both social workers and for people in the toughest times of their lives.
I discovered digital public goods in 2014 when I worked on an innovation competition called EduApp for Syria. The aim of that initiative was to reach Syrian out-of-school children with learning resources that could help them attain basic literacy.
Welcome. I am Michelle Jawando. I'm Senior Vice President of Programs at Omidyar Network, and I will serve as your moderator today. Video from this gathering is being recorded and will be available online after the event. I hope you enjoyed getting to see me in my kitchen with my little one in the background and my dear friends Leave and Kevin. We are incredibly excited to join you in a dynamic discussion. In addition from hearing from our wonderful lineup of speakers, please use the chat tool to offer your ideas and experiences and continue to share where you're joining us from. Given that we have a very full agenda to cover, I will not introduce our speakers with their full titles, but you will find these in the chat, and I will be very strict on timekeeping, even for the VIP lineup that we have joining us today. Thank you in advance to all of our VIP speakers. Today, a group of dynamic global leaders will lay out a vision for digital co-development to support an equitable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, while strengthening inclusion and human rights. We'll hear about broad-based, flexible digital systems that can do this. Digital public infrastructure, also known as DPI. We'll also see how DPI can be built using open source digital public goods, or DPGs. We have over 400 people from around the world registered to join us today. 90% of you said you wanted to attend to learn more about what digital public infrastructure is, what digital public goods are, and what you can do to get involved. So let's get started. Our agenda today is focused on how international cooperation can build digital public infrastructure. The UN system has a critical role to play, and the UN Secretary General is a vocal proponent for digital cooperation. I therefore like to introduce one of the great leaders leading this work, Maria Francesca Spatolisano, the United Nations Assistant Secretary General. Her work includes everything, including overseeing the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology. Assistant Secretary.
Thank you. Honorable ministers and commissioner, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as the officer in charge of the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, let me express the UN appreciation for the invitation to address today's meeting. Our collective commitment to supporting all countries in leveraging digital public goods and building digital public infrastructure is critical. If we are to realize the UN Secretary General vision in his digital cooperation roadmap for a more open, free, and secure future for all, we urgently need bold and determined efforts to leave no one behind. I invite you to now view a short message from the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Excellencies and friends, the international community is facing immense challenges. We are striving to respond to and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic while dealing with mounting climate disruption, rising inequality, and utterly unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. Digital public infrastructure can help solve all these challenges. Building safe and secure digital systems improves access to public services, helps scientists better understand and respond to the climate crisis, and can mitigate and prevent future pandemics. Better digital public infrastructure also helps to close the digital divide. Recent studies show that countries with low broadband connectivity can make significant development gains by connecting schools to the internet. My roadmap for digital cooperation highlights the importance of digital public goods and open source technologies. These tools can help governments and businesses to turbocharge sustainable development. The United Nations is here to serve as a platform for building a more equitable, open, and safe digital commons for all. Thank you, and I wish you a successful meeting.
Thank you, Secretary General. We must indeed better support countries in driving their own digital transformation processes and building out their digital public infrastructures. The international development community can and should do more. The Office of the Tech Envoy is honored to partner with many of you, and particularly the Digital Public Goods Alliance, on these important issues and ensuring that the UN system plays its part. So let's co-develop our digital future together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Minister Dag Inge Ulstein, our host for today's convening. Minister, could you tell us more about Norway's commitment to digital public infrastructure and our goals for today?
Thank you so much, Michelle, and excellencies and dear friends. You know, seldom has one invention served so many in such a short time as the internet, but it has served mostly parts of the world that were already well developed. If we are to stand any chance of success in eradicating extreme poverty, the tremendous potential of digital technology must be unleashed everywhere. Developing and sharing digital public goods must be part of leaving no one behind. And that is why, on the behalf of the Norwegian government, I am so happy to welcome you to this high-level event. Today, we will hear examples of the crucial importance of digital public infrastructure in managing crises and shocks, monitoring and tracking of infections and vaccine delivery. But this is not only about crises. It is about effective and inclusive job creation and about governance. It's about education, health, food security. It's about each and every one of the 2030 goals. So let's spend the next 90 minutes planning our next steps and building a strong momentum. And from our side, Norway will do its part. The essence of our digital public goods model is quite simple. Given that countries are facing the same challenges, it does not make sense to develop the same solutions from scratch each time. In 2019, we co-founded the Digital Public Goods Alliance together with the government of Sierra Leone, the Indian think tank iSpirit, and UNICEF. We believe in this alliance as a long-term coordination mechanism and are very happy to welcome the expertise of Germany and UNDP also on board. So you will shortly hear more about Germany's initiatives from Parliamentary State Secretary Bartel and about the EU's ambitious agenda from Commissioner Öpelein. Norway has made our infrastructure available for others to benefit from. Our flagship e-government platform, Altinn, and the business registry, StatBiz, have recently both been screened and verified as digital public goods. We are now sharing while doing and following in the footsteps of pioneers like Estonia, India, Sri Lanka, and Sierra Leone. We must also ensure that resource-constrained countries get the technical assistance they need. So Norway is working closely with UNICEF, the World Bank, and the UNDP on this agenda. Let me also thank the Rockefeller Foundation for all the excellent groundwork ahead of this event. I see great potential for working even more with the philanthropic community. Digitalization will be a perfect vehicle for the most effective and everlasting kind of growth, and that is the kind of growth that creates positive ripple effects and that countries and citizens create themselves. So thank you so much, and over to you again, Michelle.
If you are not passionate after hearing from the minister, I don't know what will set it off, because we are so appreciative for that great call to action. Thank you, Minister. You partnered with the Rockefeller Foundation, a dear friend of the Omidyar Network, in organizing this event. Today, joining us, representing Rockefeller Foundation, is their president, a friend to many of us here today, Dr. Rajiv Shah, who has been spending so much of his time fighting the pandemic, both in the US and around the world. Raj, I'd like to turn to you and ask, what does digital public infrastructure have to do with the pandemic, and how have you been able to engage? And I think my friend is here, but when you do everything on Zoom, you're gonna have the awkward silence. So we'll wait momentarily while he joins. If you are interested in following along on Twitter, you can follow the hashtag DPI for all. That's one of the online social media links that we are using for today. Dr. Shah, do we have you?
You know what infrastructure is. Bridges, roads, power lines, water pipes, data cables, cell towers, building blocks of society that connect us all. But what about the things that connect us in the digital world? That's where digital public infrastructure, or DPI, comes in. DPI is all around you, even in your pocket. Process this example. These days, you can send money with a swipe and a click. Many people have access to digital payments that make transactions safer and easier. Many people, but not all people. Putting the public in digital public infrastructure holds the key in making these tools available to all people. And this past year showed the importance of having DPI that works for everyone, that connects everyone. The pandemic put DPI to the test, and in these cases, robust DPI systems made a big difference in saving lives. In the early days of the pandemic, Sri Lanka built a COVID-19 tracking tool on top of their existing health data systems, based on open source tools. The system helped the nation control the spread of disease, keeping caseloads well below other countries in the region. And they share their success, opening their tools to other countries to use, adapt, and innovate. Togo used DPI to fight inequity with emergency cash transfers. In 10 short days, they created a program that has paid out more than $10 million in relief funds. By combining payments and data systems, they were able to identify the most vulnerable populations and quickly dispatch mobile payments to deliver support. Doing this helped people survive while they were protecting themselves and their neighbors. DPI worked in these cases because the solutions implemented basic, useful tools at a large societal scale. They worked by bringing government, business, and society together. They worked because they're flexible, and they work to reach everyone. What's more, they build on each other using open source digital public goods, each iteration laying the groundwork to help solve the next big problem. Like traditional infrastructure, building DPI needs cooperation and coordination. It won't be easy, but systems that are inclusive, open, and trustworthy are what we need to face the growing challenges of today, tomorrow, and beyond. Let's co-develop that future together.
Let's co-develop together. To continue that conversation, we are going to turn to frame the conversation moving forward, two speakers who know a great deal about international cooperation. First, Jutta Urpilainen, the European Commissioner for International Partnerships. Commissioner, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Michelle, and ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, my thanks firstly to the Norwegian government, the Digital Public Goods Alliance, and the Rockefeller Foundation for gathering us here today. When COVID-19 hit, society continued to function thanks to one thing: digital infrastructure. Our work, social lives, and public and private services went fully online. This was not a problem for you and me, sitting in our homes, good broadband. But too many of our fellow humans around the world were not as lucky. Today we face a global divide between the underconnected and the hyper-digitalized countries. And this must change. Digital public infrastructure at scale must be at the heart of a sustainable recovery that leaves no one behind. So, dear friends, the EU aspires to eliminate the digital divide as part of our digital decade. In December, we launched the Digital for Development Hub, D4D, in conjunction with 11 EU member states. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank two of the founding members, Estonia and Germany. The D4D Hub brings together EU member states, financial institutions, civil society organizations, academia, and local private sector partners. And our goal is clear. We promote a fair, inclusive, and green digital transformation around the world. Through the hub, we convene dialogues, exchange best practices, and foster joint partnerships and investments. The D4D Hub is a powerful example of Team Europe, a collective approach that enables EU member states and their financial institutions to work as one. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Team Europe mobilized over 40 billion euros to support our partner countries around the world. Now, as the world rebuilds, Team Europe wants to advance a human-centric approach to digital transformation. Digital infrastructure must drive economic growth and also uphold our values: openness and freedom, sustainability and inclusivity, gender equality and respect for fundamental human rights. Dear colleagues, there can be no digital infrastructure at scale without funding. And that is why the EU has made digitalization one of our funding priorities for the next 7 years. For example, we have committed 10 million euros to support digitalization efforts in the Horn of Africa. Our funding will help governments on digital transformation through the GovStack model, which has been launched by Germany, Estonia, and our international partners. It will also support efforts to strengthen cybersecurity in Horn of Africa countries, together with our French partners. Now, let me conclude. Digital technology affects literally every aspect of our societies and economies. At this pivotal moment in history, we have an unprecedented opportunity. Just as the pandemic touched us all, the recovery too much reach us all. The EU is launching a global initiative on digital connectivity to tackle the digital divide. Collaboration is key, and we are ready to work with our partners. Together, we will shape the international cooperation on digital public infrastructure. This initiative will mobilize resources and facilitate investments in new digital and data infrastructures, and will link investments with standards and values. We must press for appropriate cybersecurity and environmental standards. We must establish protocols for a free, open, and secure internet. And we must promote digital connectivity in line with the G20 principles for quality infrastructure investment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Next, I'd like to introduce Mark Fierstein from the United States Agency for International Development. Mark, thank you for joining.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thanks so much, Commissioner, for those remarks. And I want to thank as well the Royal Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Digital Public Goods Alliance for organizing and hosting this very important event. It's a delight for us to be here and for me personally to have this opportunity. Now, in the year 2021 and the years ahead, USAID, we recognize that as a development agency, we really can't be successful without making maximum use of digital technologies and infrastructure. They are an indispensable tool to achieve the development goals of our partners around the world and will be fundamental to the Biden administration's development agenda. For example, at the G7 a few months ago, President Biden announced the Build Back Better World initiative, which is a climate-friendly vision for global infrastructure development. And digital infrastructure will be a crucial piece of this effort because we recognize that without a solid and secure digital infrastructure, low-income and middle-income countries, and most importantly, marginalized and underrepresented populations will be left behind. Now, we also need to ensure that we leverage digital technology in a responsible way, one that protects the rights of individuals and invests in and protects and advances democratic values. Now, as you all know, President Biden has talked about a battle between the utility of democracies and autocracies. And development of digital technologies is just another arena where this will play out. Democratically governed open source technologies made accessible through digital public infrastructure serve as a powerful alternative to technologies that are created, sold, maintained, and controlled by authoritarian nations. Now, last year, USAID launched a digital strategy, which is focused on achieving and sustaining open, secure, and inclusive digital ecosystems that contribute to broad-based, measurable development and humanitarian assistance outcomes in low and middle-income countries. And this strategy builds on the years of investment, really, that USAID had already made in the digital public goods landscape. Now, since the early 2000s, USAID has supported the development of digital public goods in conjunction with partner governments and the private sector around the world. And just to offer one example, following the West Africa Ebola crisis, the agency formed a partnership with Google to invest in digital infrastructure in Liberia to connect internet service providers, government ministries, and universities. And this partnership has had a lasting impact because of that investment made many, many years ago. University students in Monrovia were able to continue coursework during the COVID-19 lockdown, and city hospitals were able to use the infrastructure for telemedicine and reporting. Now, USAID remains committed to the creation and expansion of digital public infrastructure globally in collaboration with our bilateral and multilateral partners, in particular those organizations that came together to create this forum today. So through the ongoing work of our digital strategy, USAID will continue to address the persistent need for more responsible use of digital technology in development and collaborate to strengthen the openness, inclusiveness, and sustainability of digital ecosystems in the countries where we work. So again, thanks so much for the opportunity, and we're looking very much forward to the rest of this forum. Thanks again.
Thank you again, Mark, and thank you for your leadership in the work of the Biden administration. Let me also just add, if you are following along on social, you can use the hashtag DPI for all. I just want to lift up something from Govind Shivkumar of the Omidyar Network, where he highlighted something that Commissioner Erpenleinen shared. Digital public infrastructure. There can be no digital without funding. And we thank both you, Mark, and the Commissioner for your great words this morning. And speaking of funding, I want to turn back now to my good friend, and a good friend to many of us, Dr. Rajiv Shah, President of the Rockefeller Foundation, who will share a little bit about their leadership in thinking about DPI post the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you again.
Thank you, Michelle, and it's great to be here with all of you. I see many friends and former colleagues, and I just so admire the work that this community is doing. I want to thank in particular the government of Norway and the Ministry of International Development and so many others who are participating here today. You know, after the rollout of Aadhaar to more than 1 billion people in India in 2009, and onwards, I had a chance to visit Nandan Nilekani, who is, of course, with us today, and saw firsthand how the digital public infrastructure that had been created in that unique and extraordinary initiative can transform the lives of people at dramatic scale. Nandan is, of course, here today, and it's so important for us to take the learnings from that and so many other experiences, our colleagues from Estonia, and of course, all around the world, and figure out how to use those experiences to accelerate the creation of real digital public infrastructure. The Rockefeller Foundation, Kevin O'Neill is representing us here today, is actively involved in this space and will continue to be. We are proud to be supporting efforts to study, understand, and share best practices across countries and communities. We are investing more than $100 million right now in a pandemic prevention institute designed to use digital public infrastructure and apply the concept to epidemiological data and other sources of data that can help identify, often before they become extraordinarily transmissive future epidemics and pandemics to ensure that no crisis like COVID-19 ever happens again. One of our major priorities as a foundation is to launch a multi-billion-dollar global collaboration to address energy poverty and to bring renewable electrification to the world. And we know that we cannot achieve that goal, especially for the more than 1 billion people that live without access to real energy, without a digital public infrastructure that enables clear, protected payments and other types of transactions, including identity. That's absolutely critical to enabling communities to participate in digital economies in the present and certainly in the future. So it's with that we will remain deeply supportive of the efforts of this community. And I just want to thank all those that have participated, especially those that represent public sector partners that often don't have the benefit of a Nandan Nilekani to join the public sector side and make things happen, but nevertheless have the challenge and the opportunity to really transform their own societies by investing in real best practices around digital public infrastructure and taking on serious, necessary, and in some cases, like in the United States, delayed reforms that can allow more effective infrastructure to come into practice. So thank you, Michelle, for your leadership and for bringing everyone together today.
Thank you so much, Raj. Always great to see you. So we have heard so much about why digital public infrastructure is important at a global scale. Systems like digital identity, payments, health data exchanges, they made a difference during the pandemic and they will continue to make a difference. I'm so excited to introduce our next speaker, as many of you are. And I'm excited about this speaker because this is someone who has personally inspired so many of us in the digital public infrastructure work. I'm excited to hear from leaders who make change happen on the ground. And there are a few who have done that than Nandan Nilekani. Mr. Nilekani was the founding chairman of the Unique Identity Authority of India. You will, of course, know his work. It was just referenced from Dr. Shah as the driving force behind Aadhaar. India's pioneering digital ID system launched, it feels like so long ago, but only in 2009. It was the basis of India's stack and one of the very few billion user platforms in the world. Nandan, it is such an honor and privilege to be with you today. Aadhaar sparked global interest in the potential of digital public infrastructure. What were some of the main features of why we term DPI, and what is your vision for DPI today?
Thank you, Michelle, and it's really wonderful to be here with this extraordinary group of people that all of you in the DPGA have put together. My own experience with digital goods started 12 years back. Of course, in those days, we didn't call it that. I was just given an assignment by India's Prime Minister to give every Indian an identity number. And the idea was twofold. One was to address inclusion, because a large number of Indians didn't have a citizenship or didn't have a birth certificate, and also to make the delivery of public services more efficient so that the people got what they deserved. We designed this as a digital platform, a digital identity. It was online, and you could authenticate your identity anywhere. And today I'm glad to say that 12 years and 2 governments later, 1.3 billion people are on this ID platform, and they do something like 50 million authentications a day and maybe 4 million electronic KYCs per day to open a bank account or to get a mobile connection. So this has been transformational. It has also been the basis for the world's largest direct benefit transfer program and for accelerating financial inclusion. In the last 6-7 years under Prime Minister Modi, 700 million new bank accounts have been opened, unique bank accounts. And this has also achieved in 10 years what would normally have taken about 45 years to get done in terms of deepening financial inclusion. and particularly there was a gender focus, and many of these bank accounts were opened for women to receive things like energy subsidies. So it was very, very inclusive in its design. And this was particularly useful in the pandemic because during the pandemic, a large number of Indian workers went back to the village from cities and they had to get some emergency funding from the government. So using this direct benefit transfer program, the government was able to electronically credit money into millions of accounts, maybe 50, 100 million accounts. And people got the money and they were employed in their village using what we call as an Aadhaar-enabled payment system, where they just do an authentication with the biometric and withdraw money from their account from the neighborhood business correspondent or grocery store. This actually has inspired people to think of ID. The World Bank now has the ID4D program, which is of course supported by Gates and governments. More than 20 countries, I believe, are looking at ID. And another important initiative after the other experience was inspired by that. An open source initiative was set up called MOSIP. Again, MOSIP has been supported by Gates, Media, and many others. And today, many countries, OSIP is an open source platform in Bangalore with a set of people and volunteers. And this is now available to the world as a free open source platform that countries can use to implement ID platforms. So this is a good example of actually creating an open source platform as a digital public good. Now, we have also in India built a payment system called UPI. This has been built as a non-profit company called NPCI, which is a state-of-the-art real-time payment system, which is very open, very high, any bank to any bank, any mobile app to any mobile app. This was launched in 2016. By October of 2016, it was doing about 100,000 transactions. And then India had a demonetization and digital payments accelerated. And then, of course, the pandemic further accelerated that because people chose to make digital payments everywhere. And today, that system last month did 3.2 billion transactions and is becoming a very fundamental infrastructure for payments. There's also very good work going on in India, and iSpirit, which is a part of the DPGA, is working on something called data empowerment architecture. And the fundamental premise is that if we don't do anything about data, then data will get concentrated with companies or with governments. But if we can create a techno-legal infrastructure which allows people to be empowered with their own data, and data is going to be plentiful as more and more people go online, and that's been accelerated by the pandemic. As they generate digital footprints or digital trails, if they can leverage data to get better services, then we have made data as an empowering thing. For example, a small business could use its digital footprint of invoices, sales, and taxes and show that to a lender to get a loan, or somebody who's looking for a second opinion on their healthcare issue can just get all the records digitally and give it to somebody else to have a second look. So data empowerment is again a very, very important idea in the area of digital public goods. I think the lesson from all this is when we think about digital public goods, we have to think of scale. In India, we can't think of digital public goods without thinking about how do we benefit 1 billion people. We have to think of inclusion. We have to think of gender inclusion and including everybody in the country, which is why with the goal of making sure each and every resident got an ID number. We have to think of low cost because you cannot build these platforms at high cost.
That's
They
right.
have to at very low cost. And we are very lucky that today's open source internet scale technology, which is widely available, allows you to build low cost systems, which is what India has been doing. One of the things we have learned is that you also have to make it interoperable, and that you should be able to connect, use it for multiple use cases, make it interoperable, and being able to combine, mix and match these various digital public goods to create new services and value for residents of a country. And we call this as a combinatorial innovation, where multiple digital public goods coexist and then they work with each other and create new value. And now we are seeing the phenomenon, seeing that particularly after the pandemic.
Yes.
And all these things were built over a decade, Michelle, and we were able to essentially India build them as layers of innovation. And the entire thing is now called as the India stack, which is thinking we can have identity, payments, you can digitally sign a document, you can store a digital locker online, all kinds of things have all come together. And now there is a very wide, sorry, Michelle, you wanted to?
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm excited because you almost took my job as moderator and setting up the next panel.
Sure.
We're talking about what are the key characteristics of what global cooperation and local impact looks like. For all those who are joining, we are so excited. Chairman Nandan Nalakani is joining us now. He will also join a little bit later in the program to give us the call to action. But if you don't mind, sir, I'm going to quickly turn to the panel of leaders from across the globe who really touched on the piece that the chairman laid out. How do we create local impact with DPI? And in particular, we've all just come through the COVID-19, and some of us are still engaged with our efforts to fight in and around the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have a few leaders who are going to share some stories about how they're collaborating with others to keep building. I'm excited to have Minister Sina Lawson from Togo joining us, Ambassador at Large for Digital Affairs from Estonia, Mila Liosk, good friend, rector of the University of Oslo, Svein Sturland, and Secretary Jayantha De Silva of Sri Lanka. Each of you have done amazing work in leading our efforts to respond to COVID-19. You use DPI and DPG. What I'd love to do is if each of you can give us a quick 1-minute overview of what you accomplished and how, and if you can go in the order that I introduced you. So we'll start with you, Minister Lawson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I want to thank the government of Norway, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the DPG Alliance. So Novici is a homegrown, all-digital mass payment platform that does not require an internet connection. We use it to pay 25% of all Togolese adults during the pandemic last year. It uses a USSD short code technology. So we deployed it last year during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it really enabled us to support 900,000 Togolese citizens and spend $34 million. Moreover, we used biometric voters ID to uniquely identify beneficiaries, but also with the help of UC Berkeley and the Innovations for Poverty Action team, we used artificial intelligence, satellite imagery, and cell phone metadata to better identify poor areas within Togo and the poorest individuals within these areas. Finally, and it seems noteworthy to add, that the Novici program gave more money to women than men. And it's something that I'd like to talk a little bit more later about, and we were able to give 15% more to women than men.
Minister Liosk.
Hello, everybody, and I'm really glad to represent the minister here today from Tallinn, Estonia, and I apologize in front of those who were actually hoping to see the minister, but this is an example of how everyday politics intervenes in everything that we do. We have talked quite a bit about COVID and the impact in digitalization, and what we saw here in Estonia was actually a confirmation that what we have been building over the past 20 and plus years has been in a way being in the right track, that has been also questioned even in a digital country like Estonia. But the other takeaway that we had from the crisis was what was actually brought out by the minister from Norway, that we are actually not that different. We as people and organizations and countries, we share similar problems, similar issues, and often our solutions to these problems are also similar. Suddenly our kids were at home and we all needed online education systems and tools. We needed still to continue receiving healthcare, consulting with our doctors. And as we saw also the example from Sri Lanka, actually our COVID response tools were rather similar as well. So we are very glad that Digital Public Goods Alliance comes at this very critical moment, because open source requires sharing and a lot of partnerships. We are glad that our data exchange solution that we call X-Road has been made available to everybody, and it has been used and is still being used by both public and private sector organizations all over the world in more than 20 countries. But what we are also very happy for is that also Estonia is no longer alone in keeping up this open source software. And we have actually partnered with Finland since 2017, and now also with Iceland, in making sure that this open source digital platform for secure data exchange is still up to the world top requirements to make sure that our data is being stored and also shared freely and securely. So with this note, I would like to end the first remarks, and I'm looking forward very much for the discussion and also continuing these partnerships that make open source software solutions possible to implement and also to keep alive in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts on this important and timely issue. The success story I want to share with you here today is about a global action research project from the University of Oslo. From its start 30 years ago, the open source-based health information system program has grown to benefit 2 billion people in 73 countries. During the pandemic, it took a new role in fighting COVID-19. The system's global academic network swiftly developed an add-on digital toolkit. It detects cases, informs response measures, and monitors equitable delivery of COVID-19 vaccines. Technical guidance, demo databases, and training materials provide all the resources a country needs to implement solutions to help curb the pandemic. Today, the toolkit is used in 42 countries and is in development in 13 more. Accessible and reliable health data is key to fight a pandemic. And this is exactly what the DHIS2 software delivers. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you. It's great to be with you all today and to share our success, especially regarding the surveillance system for COVID-19 that was developed in double quick time. When the pandemic came in, we as a small country down India, we never expected that the pandemic would hit us in this magnitude. But of course, our government at the very inception formed a presidential task force, and including me as a technology person, was very interested to bring technology and to act fast and to give the government and the people a solution that can be used within a very, very short period. Thanks to DHIS2, we managed to develop this on DHIS2, a surveillance system within a very, very short period. How did we do it? We were very fortunate that we had the capacity to do it. We engaged the private sector as well as the outside, a lot of people in developing this system. Our major problem in Sri Lanka, we are about 80% of our people are rural based. So to make it inclusive was a big challenge with the communication facilities available. But we managed to do something that is applicable to all the people. And today we are quite proud and pleased that this is being used by many countries outside Sri Lanka internationally. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will return to each person to give basically about a 1-minute lightning round. And this conversation is so rich, and I apologize in advance for everyone joining us that we don't have more time, but I'm going to quickly ask each just a follow-up question. Minister Lawson, the success that you had, particularly around cash transfers in COVID-19, it didn't start with the pandemic. And we see that it's not ending there. How do you plan to keep building the capacity? And what are some steps that you can give us for those of us who are thinking about particularly digital cash transfers?
So in 2016, we launched a project to distribute digital subsidies to farmers using mobile payments. So I think that was the start of using digital means to pay out large number of certain categories of the population. In 2020, last year, we also helped some farmers with digital loans. So when we designed the Novici project, it was really about social protection and emergency cash transfer. So it was all digital from onboarding to receiving cash. We never actually met with any of the beneficiaries. And so this year, what we're doing is that we're rolling out biometric ID for all citizens. A few years back, it was my privilege to have a conversation with Nandan Nilekani, and he convinced us to actually adopt, to deploy biometric ID. And I'm very proud to say that we have decided to adopt the MOSIP platform for our digital ID program that we are going to launch later this year with the help of the World Bank.
That's so exciting.
Yes, really exciting. And what I also want to say about Novici, it's not just about a platform sending cash to people, it's also a methodology that uses artificial intelligence. We always talk about tech for good. We were able to use satellite imagery to design a poverty map of Togo. And then when we had the poverty map, we needed to identify who the poorest individuals within Togo were. And so what we did was that we used cell phone metadata, CDRs, and working with UC Berkeley, we were able to determine people who were, who lived with less than $1.70 per day, and we decided to also support them. So I think that what is very interesting is to use artificial intelligence. It's what we call tech for good,
That's right.
And I think it's a perfect example of what we need to do. And I want to say more because now—
Minister Lawson, yes,
yeah?
I'm so sorry. I want you to say more. I love the work that you're doing in Togo, but I'm going to ask if you can continue to add things in the chat. We have so many questions that are coming in, and we're a little over time. So I'm going to quickly transition, but I just want to honor you and give you maybe 10, 15 seconds to make a closing.
Thank you. What I want to say is that we received lots of requests from other African countries who want to do the same thing. And we really want, and we're ready to support other countries who want to design, the same platform and use the methodology. And this is a good example of what, African countries coming together can do for improving situations, within our continent. So thank you for giving me the floor to talk about this wonderful project.
And thank you for your leadership, Minister Lawson. We appreciate you. Ambassador Liosk, tell us, if you can, a little bit about how Estonia has worked with the World Health Organizations and others on supporting a global pandemic response.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned before, one of the main elements of Estonia's digitalization has been our data exchange platform called X-Road. And this has been widely used around the world, and the reason is very simple. We all have data interoperability issues. We may have them inside our organization. We may have them in our municipalities, in our countries, but also within countries, but also international organizations need to tackle the data governance and interoperability issue, because often they need to collect, manage, update, and use data that actually comes from very, very many different countries with very different digitalization levels. So one way of collaboration is, of course, through bilateral partnerships. Estonia has supported several countries in data interoperability issues, but also through international partnerships. Some of these have been already mentioned, for example, together with ITU, GIZ, and several other partners. We are cooperating with a GovStack project. This brings together this knowledge from very different areas, from different countries, in very different aspects related to digitalization, and data interoperability is one of them. We are also part of the Digital for Development Hub, through which we also share some of these experiences that have been essential for the digitalization in Estonia. And one aspect that we would also like to stress here is that the X-Road, even though it forms a base for Estonia's digitalization, it's a crucial component of our digital ecosystem. It can actually be used for very small areas, for an agency, for a department, for international organization. So it has been one of the elements of sharing the knowledge. But as I said also before, digital technologies actually develop very quickly.
Yes.
And these technological changes do not take place in our countries, and they don't take place also in Estonia. So we are also seeking for partnerships that help us to keep up with these technological developments that take place outside Estonia, and make sure that we still know how to use these trends for our best needs, and following the principles that are important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we especially appreciate you for jumping in and really taking a leadership role. Rector Stolan, can you please tell us something about what we can learn from the experience of building country capacity for digital public infrastructure, and in particular, maybe an emphasis on the role that academia can play? And I'm asking everyone to stick to 2 minutes, and please still be friends with me after this moderator job. That's all I ask.
Sure, no problem. I think it's important that the software that we are producing is open. It's easily adjustable to fit different contexts. And this is part of the core idea, I think, a firm belief in open source and in-country capacity building. This way, each country can adjust to local needs and take part in the open source DHIS2 network. The training material is available on the website, free of charge, of course. I think that the success of the HISP platform is based on an extensive long-term university collaboration with NORAD as a central partner. This includes developing master's and PhD programs in health informatics in several countries like South Africa, Malawi, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Sri Lanka. Hundreds of candidates from these programs have been involved in research and development related to the HISP program and the DHIS2 software, supporting the software implementation in these countries. In Tanzania and Mozambique, for example, independent HISP groups have developed from the PhD program with joint employment at university. They have tailored the DHIS2 system to local needs with strong links to the Ministry of Health and the East Africa community. So I think that this is a key, really. The universities can contribute immensely, because we can think long-term and research-based in our interaction. And I think we have to speed up and interact even more. And also, I think that possibly we have to create more of equal partnerships than we have before. And I'm sure this will be extremely important for University of Oslo also in the years to come.
Thank you so much, Rector. And then finally, Secretary De Silva, in the last minute, if you can bring us home to share the role. Sri Lanka was one of the first countries to deploy COVID-19 surveillance and a monitoring tool, and then you shared it with the world. What was it like to share this information back with the global community?
Yeah, I think that's something that actually we have to do it, all of us. We were fortunate actually to go with the surveillance system and to build a very successful surveillance system. And in the graph shown by Dr. Shah, I suppose he showed the immense benefit that we derived from the surveillance system. But just to add a few points on that, being a country with about 80% rural, and with the culture and also the economic situations, it's extremely important to have a inclusiveness, and transparency is one of the key areas that we always bank and emphasize on. So we were fortunate, as I said, to build this system, and we were fortunate to share this with the international community, and also to witness that there are over 50 countries using this today. So we are extremely pleased. And one of the areas that Sri Lanka is strong is the education sector. And we also are very quite strong today on the IT sector. So we have managed to build a lot of applications on the open source platforms. So our knowledge on open source and our experience, we would be very happy to share with anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to honor in all of the efforts. We've learned a few things. DPI has real life impact. It takes collaboration across sectors, across borders, and openness to inclusion. Digital public goods are a key tool for collaboration. And in cases we've seen like Togo and Sri Lanka, Estonia and India, the great leadership work that we've seen coming from the University of Oslo, it makes a difference. And these examples shouldn't be the exception. They should be the rule. So we thank you all for your great work. In the next session, we're going to dive a little bit into how we co-develop DPI everywhere.
The 17 Rooms initiative was launched by the Brookings Institution and the Rockefeller Foundation in 2018, gathering global leaders to stimulate new actions for the Sustainable Development Goals. Here's the vision that the members of Room 9, focused on SDG 9, have been developing for international cooperation on digital public infrastructure.
We believe digital cooperation can strengthen societies, promote inclusion and human rights, and help us accomplish the SDGs.
Digital public infrastructure is part of the world we want. It connects us and allows us to work together.
Digital public infrastructure helps us make progress on health, social protection, financial inclusion, education, governance, and so much more.
It must be built around shared principles like privacy, openness, and public value, and protect us from surveillance and manipulation.
We can build DPI that addresses inclusion and meets the needs of everyone, no matter their gender, location, occupation, or disability.
The world can build DPI for 9 billion people, but we need a new mindset and new tools. Business as usual isn't enough.
We will do it together, using digital public goods. What we create here, we share. What you create, we will use.
We'll break silos in funding, in our organizations and in our own minds.
The private sector can help, large and small businesses alike.
We are building it together as public servants, technologists, advocates, deciders, and citizens. We have been working hard, but we are also just beginning.
Join us as we co-develop digital public infrastructure for an equitable recovery and a better world. Let's co-develop.
Let's co-develop.
Let's co-develop.
Let's co-develop. Let's co-develop.
Let's co-develop. So now it's time to talk a little bit more about the vision the 17 Rooms Group and others have called for, which is DPI everywhere for everyone. We've heard that we need to collaborate at a global level to create scale, but own DPI locally. We've also heard that this is not a poor country problem or a rich country problem. We all need better DPI. We've also heard something, and I hope you heard it too, and continue to follow along with the hashtag DPI for all, something important from each of our speakers. Countries all over the world are innovating, sharing, and building with others. Estonia, Norway, Sri Lanka, India, Togo, and beyond. Any notions of West to East or North to South transfer or dependency are outdated, and we should get rid of those ideas and notions. Co-development is everywhere, and it is equal. We've just heard about this vision from a group of global leaders assembled through the 17 Rooms process, a project of the Brookings Institution and the Rockefeller Foundation. And that vision builds on things we need to create and build together: a global commons of digital public goods, public and private capacity, safeguards to ensure that everyone is included and protected, and the right funding and financing. I'd like to now invite Michaela McKay from Sierra Leone's Directorate of Science and Technology in Sierra Leone to offer thoughts. We're also twinning with our colors today. We didn't do it on purpose, but fabulous women will do that. Sierra Leone has been a leader in collaborative building of DPI, not just at home, but globally by founding the Digital Public Goods Alliance. Michaela.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It's an honor for me to be part of this discussion, and I'm stepping in for Dr. David Senge, who is responding to a national emergency. As with several other countries, we are also making quite a lot of strides to improve on our digital transformation, generally speaking. Now, just to zoom into our DPI, Sierra Leone has about 80% of its population that has access to mobile phone. So what better infrastructure to ride on for us to be able to scale mobile communication? So we use USSD and SMS to be able to communicate with people, especially those in the rural areas and the districts that don't have access regulated to internet, but do have mobile phones, to be able to send or convey information on government service delivery, whether or not it's related to education from the Data Education Hub, whether or not it is COVID related, other health related issues. So that's a platform we are building on. In addition, I would like to comment on our geographical information system that we use to support several ministries across board to be able to gather, analyze spatial and geographic data. Also, Sierra Leone at the moment is working on this open government to person platform, and that's an open source where the government could be able to use that platform to transfer large sums of money or make large transfers, but to improve on the social protection, and especially during the instance of the pandemic of this nature, where our frontline workers, regardless of their location, could be able to receive the cash that is due them on time, whether or not they are bankable. So with those few comments, I would hand over to Michelle, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. McKay. I am now going to bring together a distinguished panel to discuss how the international community can help ensure that that vision becomes reality. And I just want to repeat something that Ms. McKay shared. Digital public goods, public and private capacity, safeguards, funding and financing. You're hearing this from many of our speakers. Take note, and we thank you again for the leadership that you have, Ms. McKay in Sierra Leone. Joining us now, Norbert Buckley, the Parliamentarian State Secretary from Germany, Jennifer Adams from the United States Agency for International Development, Bond Vegard Surgil from the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, and Teke Akwete Falkner from the Africa Digital Rights Hub. And finally, last but definitely not least, Roger Voorhees from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The heart and the vision that Michaela described is collaboration through open source digital public goods. State Secretary Barclay, how is Germany planning to support and use digital public goods?
So thank you, Michelle. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to make an even greater commitment to digital technologies. After all, more and more people now have access to a data connection. As a result, new infrastructure that is situated somewhere between global public goods and the private sector is evolving worldwide. These days, it is almost impossible to do anything without these technologies like digital ID or e-payments, whether it is a matter of business or financial transactions or something to do with education or health, which basically means no digital technology, no participation. This is something that the United Nations has also reiterated many times during the past 2 decades. The COVID-19 pandemic has also shown us that in partner countries where a digital and networked response was also possible, effective efforts to fight the pandemic were much easier to realize. Bangladesh, for example, was able to use its official population data to successfully develop a vaccination plan and a priority list for COVID vaccines. This example shows that our aim must also be to make use of existing resources like data or information. That is why, together with Estonia, the International Telecommunication Union, and the Digital Impact Alliance, we have founded the International E-Government Initiative GovStack. Our goal is to join forces in order to provide digital building blocks for open use by the global community. And the European Commission is supporting the regional implementation of GovStack in Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Sudan, and Somalia. That is why it is therefore right that we are taking the next step today and are joining the Digital Public Goods Alliance. More than 1,200 digital projects are being financed under German development cooperation. Our open source solutions in particular are having a visible impact in many areas. For example, the open digital learning platform Etingi. More than 300,000 people are using the free educational offerings and learning materials available on this platform. Another example is the contact persons management system SORMAS, developed by the Helmholtz Association. After SORMAS proved its effectiveness in helping to fight Ebola in Nigeria in 2017, for example, this open source, license-free solution is now also being deployed successfully to monitor COVID-19. In fact, it is being used both in Germany and in our partner countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, we must not forget that whatever progress we manage to achieve, digital public infrastructure must serve people and the environment first and foremost.
That's right.
That is why we need to make sure that the digital building blocks for our shared future are developed so as to be open source, license-free, and transparent to the user. This is also important because it is the only way that misuse, dependency, and security gaps can be recognized and avoided.
That's right.
Germany is therefore committed to digital cooperation. The EU's newly created D4D Hub is our key European implementing instrument and a multi-stakeholder platform for new partnerships. So we are looking forward to working with Norway and UNICEF and with our American partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, State Secretary. Jennifer, USAID has been investing in digital public goods, especially in health. Thank you. Why is this so important and what's next?
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you to the panel for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation about digital technology and the really critical role they play in responding to today's development challenges and really global challenges like COVID. So yes, USAID has been a proud, long-standing supporter of digital technologies in our development work. And we've seen the evolution of these investments over time and feel like now it's really a period of renewed commitment to the digital public goods at this moment, and we're really pleased and excited about that. Earlier, you heard my colleague from USAID, Mark Feuerstein, talk about USAID's digital strategy, and that's a policy framework through which USAID across the board is advancing open, secure, and inclusive digital ecosystems. But as you say, in particular, in the global health sector, we are working as well. In support of that strategy, our bureau, the Global Health Bureau, has published a digital health vision, and along with that, a vision for health system strengthening. And these provide some sector-specific guidance for the integration of digital infrastructure in our work. So the guidance calls for USAID to support partner countries and their digital health capacity and infrastructure, including standards-based, open-sourced software, digital public goods, which, as everyone has emphasized, are a key component of digital public infrastructure. As you mentioned, the policy guidance is new, but USAID has been supporting the development of digital public goods for a long time, starting with CS Pro. That was back starting in 1998, and that's the census and survey processing system, which has grown phenomenally and today is used in over 160 countries as the leading tool for demographic data collection in developing countries. We've also moved on to support other critical infrastructure, including the frontline data and decision support tool called ComCare, used in 80 countries, and the very famous public district health system, DHIS2, which has been mentioned already, used in about the same number of countries and extremely successful, and also a health workforce planning platform, IRIS, which is growing and used now in about 30 countries. So these are just a few of the examples of these platforms that are playing a critical role today in supporting the health efforts in partner countries and especially to combat COVID-19. So we obviously think that this will help the health systems to become more strong and also to build resilience to shocks. We know that to do this, we all have to work together. So many people have made reference to the response to the Ebola outbreak in West Africa in 2019, which really showed everyone, I think, the need for a more coordinated investment strategy. And so out of that experience in deploying digital public goods, we created Digital Square, which is a mechanism that's designed to facilitate co-investment in scalable health technology solutions. So 5 years later, Digital Square has grown to encompass 18 investors, all pooling funds, supporting 38 different digital public goods. And these tools are really important for country health systems, facilitating better clinical and community delivery of health services and responding to outbreaks. So I'm very happy to say today that we're renewing our commitment to these public goods, digital public goods in the health sector, by increasing the envelope for investment in Digital Square, going from 50 million to 170 million, and we're extending the time frame for this work by 5 years.
Excellent.
So,
excellent.
Yeah, it's good. We get to move forward. So through these visions and investments, concrete investments like the Digital Square, we really want to reaffirm, along with everyone else, a commitment to leveraging the digital public goods and achieving these critical public health goals.
Excellent. Excellent.
So we really appreciate being a part of the meeting. We appreciate all of our co-investors in the effort, and we look forward to continuing collaboration. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much each for your graciousness as I try to politely keep the program moving. You are all doing so much great work. Local capacity is so important to grow and implement our DPI systems. Director General Sohil, from NORAD's perspective, what needs to happen for better capacity building? And let me just thank the leadership of NORAD in preparation for today's event, and a special thank you to Liv.
Thank you, Michelle, and that was deserved to Liv. I think what we're seeing an example of now is that the world is at the verge of a digital paradigm shift, really. Governments worldwide would like to be in control of the technologies they are using to provide core public services and to build new features also. So a development model based on digital public goods can break down geographic, sectoral, and institutional barriers and allow trust and ownership to be built through direct engagement with open technologies. And investments in digital public goods can also be transformational. Small investments can spread, be developed, and put to use faster and more cost efficiently than many traditional paths to development. Like you said, Norway has a long history of supporting public sector capacity building and institution development as part of our development assistance, and we will continue to do so. Hence, my main message today is that NORAD will continue to be a reliable and predictable partner in our work on digital public goods, and that we will increase our support in the following areas. First, to achieve efficient results, we need coordination. So NORAD will continue to fund the core of the Digital Public Goods Alliance, one of the main coordination mechanisms for the digital public goods ecosystem. Second, government services need to keep pace with the opportunities of digital transformation and provide safe and democratic solutions. And as part of this, we will continue to provide core funding to digital public goods like DHIS2, mentioned several times already, and MOSIP also mentioned. We also plan to support open civil registration and vital statistics. And in addition, NORAD is working now with the Norwegian National Statistics Agency and the Digitalization Directorate to ensure that Norwegian open source platforms that are part of our digital public infrastructure are screened and verified as digital public goods and can be used in international development. Third, we will support innovative solutions. The World Bank's IDE for Development and Government-to-Person Payments are two funds giving technical assistance to countries implementing digital public infrastructure. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was an early supporter, and I encourage other donors to follow. And we will also support innovation in other ways. In NORAD's new strategy, supporting and scaling innovation is given high priority and placed center stage. And fourth, NORAD will work with academic institutions and networks to explore how we can leverage academia for long-term capacity. We are working with the University of Oslo currently. You heard from their rector here before. And we are also keen to work with others, simply because facts should inform policy. As part of the Digital Public Goods Alliance, Norway has been deeply involved in preparing today's event. We will continue to coordinate and mobilize resources and look forward to working closely with the philanthropic community and other bilateral donors. We do this because technologies and digital solutions can help countries grow, improve welfare, and strengthen green development. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We haven't talked enough about the risks created by digital identity. And these systems have so much potential for good, but also exclusion, surveillance, and control. To Key, what safeguards do we need and how do we create them? And thank you so much for your leadership at the African Digital Rights Hub. Longtime fan of your work.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for having me. And I'm very excited about an initiative like this. But as usual, as I hear all the beautiful things that we are all committing to, my antennas are very high on the risks and the safeguards. Coming from a continent of Africa, there is no doubt that digital tools are indispensable for our future. And the DPI, as proposed, is definitely going to make headway, but has already even begun making headway. However, one of the high risks we continue to face on a continent such as Africa is the marginalized and the underdeveloped population that we have, And if for nothing at all, one of the things that we are not talking a lot about is that is the possibility of these tools further widening the digital divide within our communities. And these are not just digital divides with consumers, but also digital divide when it comes to the innovation, the technological innovation. A lot of our countries are not at the forefront of the development of these technologies, which is why I'm very excited at the, positioning of open source. But even then, there must be very deliberate efforts to ensure that, we are not people from continents such as ours are not just consumers of these technologies, but are at the forefront of the innovation so that our communities will also develop or benefit from the development of these projects. There is also a challenge when it comes to access and inclusion. And I must say that in as much as we like to, talk about issues of access, we have to be very, very deliberate in ensuring that the marginalized and the underserved are met. In my country, for instance, during the period of the COVID, I had the opportunity of experiencing a young gentleman that had been put in school. And as I speak to you right now, this man has essentially been driven. He's dropped out of school because he could not afford. They did not have television. They did not have access to telephones. His parents could not afford a basic phone that would allow him to engage in classes which were organized. Mm-hmm. So he was unable to have access to platforms such as that. And so whilst we are talking about innovation, we have to be very deliberate about the fact that in spite of all these technological tools that we provide, people will continue to be left behind. That's right. And so we have to be mindful of those people. We also have to look at the impact of the human rights issues, and human rights and the data governance issues must be at the forefront. We should not just talk about these technologies without recognizing that it will affect issues such as security. It may affect issues around surveillance. It will affect issues around privacy. It will affect issues around freedom of information and access and other fundamental human rights. So we need to make that the fundamental human rights issues the forefront of engaging and pushing for these technologies. I think once we are able to do that, then initiatives such as these will have a broader and a more equitable benefit to everybody.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership. Roger, your foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, works and funds so many global goals. What needs to change and how? And specifically, how can the philanthropic community stand up in this movement?
Thanks, Michelle. And I should say, you're doing a great job today in a really challenging environment. So it's nice to see so many of our friends and partners on this call that live on the front lines of these issues every day. And I appreciated Teki's comments about seeing our friends from sub-Saharan Africa being developers and not just consumers of this technology. I want to thank the Norwegian government, the Digital Public Goods Alliance, and the Rockefeller Foundation for inviting me here today. We really believe at the foundation this is a hinge moment in the history of digital public infrastructure. Amidst the pandemic, governments are trying to find better ways to identify their residents, pay them, and quickly and transparently share the data across public systems. For me, the work is also about creating the infrastructure that leverages the incredible potential of people and countries around the world. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to ensure that the digital infrastructure underpinning these efforts is inclusive, secure, and interoperable. First, I'll highlight three principles that should guide our investments. Then I'll discuss how we can apply these principles at scale. First, principle one, we should not assume that new technologies are welfare enhancing. The Gates Foundation will continue to invest in rigorous impact evaluations to test how digital systems are impacting low-income households, women, and other traditionally marginalized populations. Second, digital technologies are not just intrinsically good or bad, their impact hinges on how they're governed. Are they governed in a way that protects consumers, ensures competition, and respects human rights? Are they governed in a way that leaves consumers exposed, entrenches monopolies? To encourage robust DPI governance, the Gates Foundation will continue to invest in technical assistance programs like the World Bank ID4D, the G2XP initiatives, which help governments build robust DPI and responsibly apply these technologies to strengthen public service. Third, governments should not have to rely exclusively on proprietary software. If countries can reference world-class open source tools, they'll be better equipped to select the technology that meets their country's needs. The Gates Foundation will continue to invest in strengthening open source digital public goods, including Mojaloop, MOSIP, and as we've heard from others, DHIS2. That's what's needed to apply these principles at scale. Rigorous research, good governance, open source tools that will require distinct built-for-purpose efforts, and yet resource mobilization in digital is plagued by fragmentation. All of us as donors make separate grants to support research, TA programs, digital public goods in each vertical. And I think it's really time to bring together all the work we do in ID, health, and agriculture, and to get rid of at least the fragmentation that occurs across 20 different efforts. So while we may need 20 efforts to help implement DPI, we should not extend this fragmentation to how we mobilize resources. A more effective approach would be to establish a nodal resource mobilization platform, a Gavi for digital public infrastructure, which donors can mobilize big ticket contributions from the G7 and G20 private donors while coordinating this investment, ensure the geographies that are underfunded are reached. Without more integration, we will miss this opportunity. Thanks for your time, and thanks, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Roger, for your leadership as always. Thank you to all of our panelists. This has been just such a rich conversation, and your commitments, your leadership show what is possible if we work together to co-develop. You should hear the word co-develop haunting you in your sleep tonight, if that's the one takeaway. We can co-develop good DPI for a world of 8 billion people. Nandan Nilekani helped launch a vision of DPI everywhere. Nandan is going to take us home with a 4-minute call to action and also a statement of his own philanthropic commitments and leadership. Nandan, what do we need to do next?
Michelle, this has been a really fascinating event, and I think it's a seminal milestone in the journey of digital public goods. It was great to hear Roger just now talking about their commitment to this. I think from my side, I think I have been doing a lot of philanthropy on building DPG. The entire Sunbird platform for learning is one of them, and another one is DVOC, the digital vaccination certificate, which has been launched in 3-4 countries, and we're working with the Gates Foundation to take it everywhere. But I think the message is that while we have the alliance now, we need to come together and create a nodal agency, as Roger mentioned. I think we need to create an entity, all of us, the funders, the governments, the foundations, to come together. This is an important trend we are seeing in philanthropy called collaborative philanthropy, where philanthropists are coming together and funding common programs. This has been a great initiative, and Bill Gates has been very supportive of that. We have initiatives like Co-Impact and many others where philanthropists are jointly funding things. There's a need to have a similar vehicle for DPG or DPI, and this vehicle needs to come together, maybe incubated. That Co-Impact was incubated in the Rockefeller Foundation, and then was once it reached a certain size, it was sort of matured out of there. So I think that model is something we can do. The Giving Pledge has been the annual meeting of funders that is organized by the Giving Pledge group at the Gates Foundation, and perhaps next time there'll be a physical event, perhaps in June of 2022. This could be one of the things, but it's important that we don't leave it here. We continue. We all come together, create this vehicle, incubate this vehicle, get a good CEO, and get the process going. I think there will be huge amounts of money out there in governments and in philanthropies to support this. We need to do a much bigger job of orchestration of all the efforts that making out in the world, and really leveraging and aligning all the DPIs in terms of the SDG goals to build impact on the world in the coming 10 years. So I think the next step is really to start talking about creating an entity which we can all contribute to and take it forward. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, sir. So we've learned today more about digital public infrastructure, the basic systems like digital identity, payments, and data exchanges that can connect us at a societal scale. We've also seen how innovators have built on DPI, many open source, to slow disease spread and deliver help. We've also heard calls for caution and the need for safeguards for inclusion, gender inclusion, and protection. And we have an agenda for equitable global co-development based on digital public goods. We are so thankful to all of our participants, all of the leaders around the globe who are committed to doing this work. We thank all of you for joining us, those following along on social media. Thank you to all of the leadership team at Rockefeller, Kevin, Nicole, Liv at NORAD, Fred and Kara, many of those behind the scenes who you don't see, Govind and Abby doing this work. We are so thankful for your leadership and making this possible. Thank you to everyone for joining us. And remember, this is not the end of the conversation. This is the beginning. Let's co-develop together. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.